Hello, everyone. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to remind you that my book, Drummers on Drumming, is available now on Amazon as both a paperback and an ebook. Based on the Big Fat Five segment of this podcast, where I sit down with my favorite drummers to discuss the 5 records and stories that shaped their approach to the instrument, this book is packed with insights from the drummers who redefined how we think about the modern drum set. You can grab your copy now by checking the link in this episode's show notes or simply searching Drummers on Drumming on Amazon. So thank you for all the support, and now let's get into the show. Hello. Welcome back to Big Fat Five, a podcast financially supported by Big Fat Snare Drum. This week's guest is Ian Maciak, or as many of you might know him, Ian Hits Drums on Instagram. His machine-like playing incorporates the proper pinch of humanity, just enough to pull you in and build the soundscape that only he can create. I've loved the finesse of his playing from afar for quite some time now, and it's certainly a direction I want my own playing to go, so I was stoked to see what he had to say. You can check him out on the track Sleepy Pietro from the new Machine Drum album, or relax to his drumming in the Focus and Lo-Fi Beats playlists on Headspace, among many other projects that he'll be announcing soonish. Also, go check out his Patreon, where you can download his original drum grooves, loops, and one-shots. The link to that is in his Instagram bio. But alright, enjoy my show with Ian Maciak and the top 5 influences that shaped his amazing style. Cheers.
Career I currently have, like so much of it just came from posting all my stuff on Instagram, and then just people DMing me like, hey, do you want to work together? And then, later on down the line, it started being people that I have been listening to their music for, decades. And It was pretty freaky. But going before that, I kind of grew up in like a musical family. Everybody plays multiple instruments, so I was always around it, and then went into like the school system, starting in elementary school, and even then, like, I wasn't really playing drum set. It was more either melodic percussion, like xylophone, and then just anything that you could do in the concert band in the school district at that time. And then in college, I sort of got out of it, or just got out of playing for a little bit, first couple years of college, and then started getting back into playing kit after 2 years of college. And I ended up dropping out of college. Just wasn't really working out for me. And then I moved up to Erie. I think it was almost like 10 years ago now. And that's when I started like really getting serious about trying to make music and trying to do something within the industry.
Why'd you stop playing drums for a little bit? Because I also stopped in my mid-20s. There was a 10-month span where I went to school for wine, and I was like, "Oh wow, drums are for kids. Like that's a pipe dream. I need to grow up." And now I'm here. But why'd you stop initially?
Well, when I was at college, like, I didn't go for music or anything. I honestly don't even know why I went to college, other than like social stigma, like, oh, I have to go.
Common
so
tale,
I went for I went for like pre-business, like a business degree. Ended up hating that. I switched to geology because I've always been like super into that, and it ended up not working out because I met somebody and then got into a bunch of drugs and everything, and
oh shit, okay,
it just kind of, playing music wasn't really what I was worried about at that point.
Sure.
But I'd say, I think it was my sophomore year after I switched my major, because I played lacrosse in college, and the head of student affairs was our coach. So I told him, like, I want to switch majors. Like, I can't do this anymore. So he switched all of my classes for me, but he never switched my major. So then for an entire year, I was taking courses not going towards my major.
Lovely.
I had no idea until I got a letter in the mail saying you are now expelled because you have not completed any of these courses going towards your major. I was like, oh, great. And before I got that letter, he retired.
I laugh, and I hope you're laughing too, but that is ridiculous.
Oh, it was so ridiculous. And at the time, like being just not worrying about school at all, being kind of messed up on drugs a lot, it was like, well, I guess this was inevitable anyway. So I ended up transferring to a different school after that summer and like getting out of that relationship, trying to get back on track. And I went to a school for basically a semester for music. And even then it was like, this still isn't for me.
Yeah.
And at the end of that semester, one of my high school friends who I've been playing with since high school, hit me up and he's like, hey, I'm in town just looking to play some music. And he texted like 3 people at the school that he knew were there and all 3 drummers. And I got back to him first. So he came down to the apartment and we set up and we jammed for the weekend. And he was saying, he's like, hey, I'm moving back to Erie from New Hampshire. And I'm just trying to get something going, get a band going, just start making music again. And for whatever reason, it was like, it blew my mind that's like, he was there in my apartment saying these words. I'm like, dude, I'm coming with you. We'll find a spot, we'll move in together and let's do it. I mean, even when I was at the first college that I was going to, I knew like I would never stop playing music just because it was ingrained in me from such a young age. But it was never like a serious thought of like, okay, I need to do this. And then like, I'll have this plan. I'll be able to go to a different city and start networking with people and all this. It was never like me taking it seriously enough to make all those moves. And then when he came down, it was kind of like, okay, I'm just going to do it myself because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. We don't know what the hell we're doing, but we're going to do what we said we would do, all those years ago in high school and just like talking out of our asses about it. But then it just kind of finally came to this moment. I was like, okay, let's do it. And luckily when I told my parents I'm not going to college anymore and I'm moving 2 hours away to just be a musician and figure it out, they were totally supportive of that. I think after my past relationship and seeing me go through everything I put them through, they were finally happy to see me like making a concrete decision and like just going after something and being passionate about it. Because for a long time, I was kind of just like emotionally like flatlined. I was, especially after like my college experience and being with that person, it totally like wiped me out. I didn't know what to do with myself. I like was sort of emotionless for a while and then started getting back into it. And then when Chris came down, that was like the catalyst to finally like, okay, I'm going to pull myself out of this and do something with myself rather than just sit here and wonder what the hell happened. I did like the first ever interview I ever did about like drums or anything. Basically, it's me talking for like an hour and a half about how messed up I was and at that point in my life and all these crazy stories of what happened. And then after I was done, I was like, what the hell did I just do? No one knows who I am. I just was interviewed and I told them this horror story of my life.
Well, I mean, I think those are the conversations that whether you can relate exactly to, going through some hard drugs. I mean, most people can relate to the shitty times as opposed to like, I'm a drummer. I've always been amazing. So just do what I did. People are like, oh, in some way I can parallel what his, struggles were.
No, exactly. And I was honestly so surprised for people that after that interview would reach out and just say like, hey man, I either kind of went through the same thing or I have a friend that's doing this. And like listening to that was hitting my hi-hat here. Listening to that was like really helpful and blah, blah, blah. So even getting, like 4 or 5 people DMing me, that type of stuff, it was like really like, oh, wow. I'm really glad it actually hit home with some people.
Sure. And there's enough podcasts about histories of drummers. I'm sure the impact you made on those 4 people were tenfold the impact that just a drummer that would have wanted to just hear about your history, you know? So,
Right.
What kind of music was it that you guys played?
Man, I don't know. We were pretty into, like, I guess you could call it like math rock a little bit, but we're both very into like cinematic music, whether it was from an actual movie or just things that like very epic sounding like soundtracks. So we were kind of trying to mix the two. And at first we were just a duo. I was playing drums. I had like a sample pad and a pedal board set up for the sample pad. He played keys, guitar, had an octave pedal for his guitar to like make bass lines and loop. So he had a looper station, his computer. We used the K-Oscillator Pro because he also played trumpet, and he would run his trumpet through that, make some loops with it. So it was all over the place, and we were trying to just pump out as many ideas as we possibly could. And then I think like a year or two after it was probably a year after we did that project, we played a gig in Erie, and there was a couple dudes there that were checking us out, and we ended up talking to them, and then they both joined us, and then we made our project with the worst band name ever, just pronunciation wise. So it's SPETHZ, which stood for 7.83 hertz, which is the Schumann resonance of the Earth. So Speths. Yeah. Terrible decision.
I mean, there's a band called the Butthole Surfers. So
That's true.
I think Speths is still above that. Although maybe, yeah, I mean, I guess it's all subjective, but well, Erie, PA. So obviously we were talking beforehand that obviously that reminds a lot of drummers of the movie That Thing You Do. But is that a music scene up there?
There's like a small local scene, and it's kind of just like small town local scene. Everybody kind of gets recycled through different bands and makes different groups and everything. There's a lot of people making music and playing music. And I think currently I feel like there's more people getting into like the production realm, like either making beats or making tunes for other people. And there's now he's not local anymore. He just moved to South Korea. But this guy I knew, Najee Adamson, and he just goes by Najee, but he's like easily one of the most talented producers and singers, drummer. Like he does everything. And he was like this completely unknown person in this town and had been here for like 8 years or something, maybe even longer than that, but constantly pumping out fantastic music. But I think the town is much more like, hey, we're going to go see a blues band on Friday. That same blues band we've seen for 15 years.
But they might do a different blues song, so that's why we're going. Well, he got as far away from Erie, PA as he possibly could, looks like it.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's got some pretty good success for everything that he's put out. Like I said, he's absolutely incredible. I can't remember. I think he has a bunch of releases on like Soulection, and he works with a bunch of other producers on that label. But really, really cool stuff, like R&B, hip hop type stuff. But the way he like makes his beats and the way he sings, especially, is super, super unique. Like something I haven't really heard anybody do, especially in that like realm of music before. So super, super talented dude.
Sweet. I'll drop some of his. I'll drop a link of his in the show notes for everyone that's listening. You guys can go check it
absolutely.
out. All right. So I did want to talk. I mean, we're probably going to touch on this when we get into your 5 choices, but you have a very light touch, and the older I get, sometimes the lighter you play, the more internal you can get as a listener, and that's like the heaviest stuff you can play, you know? And so it's like the older you get, it's like the softer, the more rock and more powerful it is. So have you always had a light touch? I
don't, when I'm playing, it doesn't feel like, or I'm especially not thinking like how much velocity I'm using. It's just like it's either my comfort level for whatever I'm playing, or I'm trying to be dynamic within the genres that I'm playing. But I feel like that comes from like all of my like high school band stuff, just like getting pounded by my drum instructor and band teacher about like the using dynamics, especially because our band director was a percussionist. So she was just all like, I mean, she was so hard on the percussion section, and that was incredible actually, because it taught me just like, at least at that young age, it wasn't, there was a lot of people that were like, oh, I'm going to join band and blah, blah, blah. Well, it'll be fun. And then they met Mrs. Seco, and she kicked their ass until they quit band because she wasn't having anybody in that band that couldn't play.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it comes from playing local gigs, especially like jazz trio gigs, whether it's like a wallpaper gig or we're just like set up in the corner for like a dinner, whatever. And you have to play quiet, because I am not good with brushes at all. So I don't want to use like hot rods or anything. So just playing as absolutely like quiet as possible on those gigs, but still having the ability to play what I want to play and be musical with it, other than, you know, just playing like the bare bones thing because it's so goddamn quiet. Doing those gigs for like 4 or 5 years, I feel like that definitely shaped the touch I have on the kit. Well, going back to your point of like when you're playing quieter and you have like that a deeper connection to what you're doing because you can hear everything, like that's, I couldn't agree more with that statement, because that's, especially if I'm playing to music or I have like I'm recording to something, I usually monitor my drums like in my headphones, which it's more of a recent thing that I started doing probably like 6 or 8 months ago, because I would normally just have like the click and the music in my ear, and then what I'm hearing of my drums, it's just in real time. I'm hearing it through my headphones. But when I started monitoring my drums and like trying to match the level of the song or whatever I'm doing, even with the click, I felt like I was getting it was the connection to the music would happen so much faster because I'm hearing my drum sounds. I don't have any question about that. And then I'm really focusing on matching the dynamics of whatever tune I'm playing to or whatever I'm recording.
Yeah.
And I feel like monitoring myself in the headphones like made that go even deeper.
Yeah, I need to get better at right now I have those like Home Depot airplane traffic controller ones that like make any drum set just sound like it's perfectly in tune, and it has this warmth to it. But yeah, then that I'm playing louder than I need to because I don't really, the dynamics are not present. But speaking of playing quietly as well, so I noticed that in your past videos you were in more of a practice space, but now most of your videos are in your house. Is that a COVID thing, or is that just a convenience of work thing?
Yeah. It was like 2 or 3 weeks into the quarantine, and I had moved some stuff to the house out of my practice space, but the space I was in was gigantic. It had like 14-foot ceilings. I can't remember the dimensions of the room, but I could make like a small drum shop in there if I wanted to.
Yeah.
It was massive. And I shared it with 2 people a few years ago, and then they both moved out of town basically without telling me. So then I was the only one still there that was on the lease. One of them even signed a fake name on the lease, which I didn't know until we looked at it. So
let's have the rest of the podcast just be about those relationships. That'd be interesting.
But yeah, a couple weeks into quarantine, I moved everything back here, and then maybe a week after doing that, I was like, I don't need another space to go to, because I always had this thought in my mind, like I need to go somewhere to work. Like I need to go to work every day. I'm gonna wake up and take the dogs out and bring them home, and then I'm gonna leave and go to work.
Totally get that.
But now I wake up and I'm in my office. Like,
it's hard to complain.
I walk down the hall and it's right here. And that was just so much better. And just being home with the dogs, with my wife, like constantly, because she works from home too. She's an artist, and she's been working from home for a full year now. And that wasn't even like quarantine related. She had a job as a gallery director, but then left that to just do art full time.
It's awesome.
And then quarantine hit like 2 months after that. So being home all the time with her and the dogs, it was just it helped my my mentality. But I was far happier doing that, because there would be some days I'd be at my studio, my drum set up, all the mics and everything, and it's just such a big room, and it's in this old industrial building, and there's crap all over the place from the other two guys that left, all their broken gear and books and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I would just be like sitting there in the chair looking at my drum set. It's like, this is not a good situation.
Yeah,
like,
not inspiring at all.
Very hard. Yeah, it was very hard to be creative by the end of that.
Well, I remember the first few times I've seen you play, your wife and your dogs are just in the background while you're playing. They're just chilling, reading books. It's like, oh, that's just, it also is a testament to how delicate your touch really is, you know. But it was just, it's a cool vibe. And I was like, you know, you have your lights, and it's a very cool aesthetic. Yeah, I mean, it's the only place I could probably put my drums in this house. They take up like a quarter of the living room. So you walk in, my computer, speakers, interface, right up against the wall, and then drums right here, and then the rest of the living room. Yeah. You set up your kit very ergonomically smart. I guess ergonomic is the word I'm not sounding smart. You set your kit up very ergonomically, and the older I get, the more I do that. Did you ever grapple with that whole, like, my set has to look cool as opposed to not being as ergonomic for my body, or were you always just smart?
I've always been smart.
And there we go, guys. Thank you for tuning in.
All right. But no, I honestly, especially when I had the old studio space, I wouldn't keep a single setup the same for more than like almost like half a day at a time.
Really?
I would always be changing stuff, and just whether I'm like trying a new setup and sometimes I would just like try to make myself uncomfortable with how it's set up and see like what would come from that. But most times it was like, all right, I'm going to put this rack tom up. I fucking hate rack toms. All right, put a snare up there.
I've seen you say that a few times in reference to videos and stuff. What's your deal with rack toms?
I don't know. I just, for a lot of the stuff that I like to play, I guess there's not a lot of like tom work in it, like in jungle, drum and bass. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you can find songs that are completely like based around tom parts in those genres. But for what I like to play, all I really need is kick, snare, hat. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to having that rack tom option, I'd much rather have a different snare sound or a different hi-hat sound. Because a lot of my setups, there's like 3 hi-hat sounds, 4 snare sounds, 2 kick drums now. And it's the same with crash cymbals for me. I think I own 2 crash cymbals, and I usually just use them as hi-hats.
Yeah, I'm talking like I'm a sage right now, but the older I get, the less I like crash cymbals. When I hear them in music, when I do them myself, it's just like they're I'll say it, they're just not needed 99% of the time. It's like you don't need to tell people like, here's this next section. Just go to the next section.
Yeah.
But then I play live, and it's just, you know, because I also play in a band called Eve 6, and so that we have to play with a lot of bright A custom the whole time. So, you know, I just have to turn my brain off when I do that. But it's also fun. So, all right, well then, let's just get into your top 5. I've taken up a bunch of your time already. So, and I was really excited when we talked, because you were kind of saying how you're not as much of a drum geek when it comes to, you know, influenced by drummers per se. And I was so excited to hear, you know, the direction you took. So we can just get into it, and it's going to be probably the least drummy episode we've had in a while, which is great. So
that's what I did. I felt like I had to include one drummer in there, but when we get to it, he's definitely like the one drummer that when I heard that music is like, I want to do that.
Yes. And we'll get into him. And he's only been mentioned one time before, and it makes me sad that he's not mentioned more. Oh, but all right. So the number one for you is your immediate family, because everyone plays different instruments, and you sort of alluded to it at the beginning, but you skimmed past it. And so just kind of talk about your family and the upbringing that way?
Yeah, so both my parents, my mom and dad, and my older brother all play different instruments. My dad like guitar, bass. He played trumpet in a band for a while. He sings. My mom plays bass mostly, but like mandolin, guitar, and every year my dad will end up getting her a new instrument for Christmas. It basically like, hey, learn this one because remember that one song that had that flute part? Yeah, we're going to cover that this week.
Yeah.
So every year it's just like, here, Fonda, have another instrument.
Yeah.
But my brother, my older brother, he plays just about everything. And when I was younger, I was very jealous of how easily like different instruments came to him because he started playing guitar when he was super, super young. So then like just picking up a bass, learning how to do that. When my parents got me my first drum set, he immediately sat down and was like playing beats and doing all this stuff. I was like, dude, just stop. Okay. I haven't even touched it yet. And you're light years better than I am. So there's a little bit of frustration there.
Is he good at writing or is he just good at executing?
Yeah, no, he can write. And when we were younger, I mean, he was really into like grunge when he was younger. And then that turned into like metal and death metal. Like when I was in 6th grade, trying to cover like Cannibal Corpse songs with him on guitar and like screaming into a microphone. And then he would like stop halfway through. He's like, it's not like that. He'll sit down and show me how to do it. I'm like, come on, man. I'm trying here.
Were you trying to play loud or were you playing like
well, at that point it was definitely loud.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, playing Cannibal Corpse, you kind of have to be loud.
Yeah. I can just imagine you playing Cannibal Corpse and you're just kind of doing these like drum and bass loops or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And from a young age, my parents definitely like exposed us to a bunch of different styles of music. I remember being pretty young, and I think right around the time where I was starting to take private lessons, we would always go to like the Pittsburgh Philharmonic or whatever, go see like actual Philharmonic orchestras a lot. I remember going down to like the Benedum and different theaters down there to see a bunch of orchestral music when I was younger. And I feel like that's like, it got me into, or like it, I always really enjoyed that type of music. So when I finally got into like the school system with concert band and everything, I was like really ready to do that. And my first private lessons were all for like marimba. So the first thing I learned how to do percussively was read music and then started getting into melodic percussion. And I did that for a while. And then someone showed me a drum set, and all of that information flew out of my head.
As it should.
Like, I'm done. I'm done with this. And that's, I mean, I regret it today because when I'm looking at a keyboard, I'm like, okay. Yep. I think I remember this.
Pinky there.
And then 6 hours later, I have like 16 bars that I wrote.
That's great.
In a lot, other than orchestral types of music, like my parents were always into like rock and blues, some funk, just kind of everything. Especially my dad. My dad was always into like some really wild music, and still is. I remember. I mean, I can't remember when Tune Yard's first album came out, but like he heard it somewhere and he immediately just like sent it to me. He's like, hey man, you got to check these guys out. And I feel like every couple of weeks, my dad's sending me new music that I've never heard of. I'm like, where are you finding this stuff, man?
Yeah.
Like, it is always so good too. And watching, I guess watching them play with their friends or in bands, it was always like in the back of my head, is like, man, I want to do that. This is what I want to do. Even when I was still doing like melodic percussion and everything.
Do you feel like you have a natural ability at the drums, or is it something that you had to work at and that's kind of this obstacle that you always have to?
I always felt like the coordination for it was there, but like my brain, when I was like first getting started, my brain didn't want to put the notes like where they should be, at least like for drum beats. Because when I started playing, the first thing that I would do especially with my snare drum, like I never wanted to do just like backbeats. If I was listening to a song or like playing to a song, my left hand would always try to like match the vocal line or like a lead guitar line.
Interesting.
And like do those like not, and I didn't really think of them as like ghost notes back then. It was like that's the voice I want this to have. So then when I was getting more and more into it, going back, like I almost had to like teach myself how to play a backbeat over top of everything else. And that was like kind of challenging when I realized I had been doing that type of stuff for so long. It's like, why can't I play 2 and 4 on the fucking snare drum? Like, this is so difficult for me right now.
I still can't. So yeah, I mean, we can go to number 2 if you want. I mean, most of what you said, I'm not familiar with besides John, but Mr. Oizo.
Yeah,
and so,
Mr. Wazo.
Wazo?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
He's
there
a
you
French
go.
guy.
Case in point. Mr. Orzo, like Greek orzo salad. So Mr. Wazo, and I'll just play, I know you said just him in general, but I'm just going to play Flat Beat, the radio edit, and from the Flat Beat EP from 99. But let's just play a little bit of that, and then we can talk about him afterwards.
All right.
Oh yeah, I used to know Quinnan. He's a real jerky.
All right. Dan Maya was impressed with my fade out skills, so I hope I'm still living up to the standards.
That was perfect.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, so I know the first time that I heard it, my brother used to, well, I guess he still skateboards. He was really into it. So he would get like the 411 VHS tapes, skate videos, and I just remember on the one, I can't remember, I actually tried to look up like what episode it was, but they had Flat Beat playing in it. I just remember like I would want him to like, yeah, play that one, do that, like put this one in again, I want to watch this one again. And every time it would come on, I would just get so amped up for that song. And it was the first time I heard it. And then I think, man, I don't know when that would have been, if that came out in 99, but a while ago. And then after hearing that, my brother had his album Analog Worms Attack. And after listening to that album, it was like, it blew my mind. The bass sounds that he could generate. And I know a lot of it was probably with hardware at the time, but just the sound of that album, because I mean, it's all very like hip hop or some of it. I know a lot of like bigger dubstep producers kind of like tip their cap to Mr. Wazo, and he's worked with a lot of bigger producers now, but they always talk about like Analog Worms Attack and how that like really inspired them to get into bass music. Like, cool. Even though a lot of the beats are like very hip hop style, you know, some of them get up to like either like 140 BPM, and even that one, that's kind of like a house tempo tune. Yeah. But it was the first time that I'd heard anything like that, and it totally freaked me out. So then after my brother showed me Analog Worms Attack, I just wanted to get into like anything that he possibly had. And then years down the line, I found out that he was actually a filmmaker too. Oh, of course. Yeah. But honestly, if you just look up Quentin Dupuis and check out some of his movies, they are really freaking good. Yeah, the one movie, I think it's just called Wrong. Okay. That's probably my favorite one of his. Is he still producing music, or is he? Oh, yeah. Yep. Okay. Yeah, I
Well,
think
there you go.
his last album came out maybe a couple years ago. It seems like he's more invested in filmmaking right now.
Okay.
But I'd say like every couple years he'll come out with a new album.
And I'm assuming he scores his own movies or
Yeah,
all that
usually.
stuff. So it's kind of like you get an album with every
Yeah,
release,
right.
baby, you know, so yeah.
But that was definitely, it was like my introduction into electronic music, I would say.
That's sick. That's sick. Before we go on to number 3, I do want to play something, and I kind of wanted to see how you dissect beats, because it's actually your most, I believe it's your most recent Instagram post, and I just want to play it. It was you playing. Yeah, you learned an Aphex Twin song pretty quickly, and so I just want to play it for people, and then I just want to hear you decipher how you did that. It's that fill at the end that blows my mind. Yeah, that's sick, man. So which song is that again?
It's Vord Hosben.
Okay.
All of his track titles are pretty insane.
Yeah.
But no, I mean that's off of Drux, which is definitely one of my favorite Aphex albums. I had one of my like Patreon members just message me and say that he was transcribing the tune for like a recital for whatever college he's going to, and just had some questions on like trying to get the sounds on the acoustic drum set to match more of what's going on in there, which it's kind of, I mean, tough to do if you're not just going to immediately do everything in post and just like EQ everything so it sounds more electronic. So we started talking about that, and then I remembered how much I love that album and that tune. So I just sat down and started, I took like the first chunk and I cut it out of the song, and I just started looping it and listening to it before I even was playing it, so I can just take a mental note, especially of where the kick patterns were. And then after I do that, I usually just start playing 16th notes between the hi-hat and the snare.
Okay.
So then I can start to see like where all the snare accents are. And from playing like drum and bass and jungle so much, there's definitely like these micro, not like licks or anything, but just like groupings of like 3 notes, 5 notes that can have multiple like stickings like very easily. So then working with the hi-hat and snare only, and then having the kick be exactly what's in the song, I can start to like decide like, okay, if I do a double here, then that's going to free up this hand to hit this sound, or I can switch over to the other hi-hat sound and still have the snare be where it needs to be. So it's just like making those decisions on the kit just sonically, rather than, you know, like just blowing over the tune and doing whatever you want on it. Because if I would do like a cover like that, if you can even call it a cover, I played like 30 seconds of the tune. I always want to like match everything that's going on. Probably listened to that album hundreds of times now. So just like being able to sing it to myself first and then listening to it on a loop for a little bit is like, all right, I think I know like basically what's going on. But then it's just making the decisions of when to use the sounds or when to match the sounds. Because in there's at least what I am hearing. Well, not even what I'm hearing, because there's so many different hi-hat sounds, but there's one part where the hi-hat like it's pitched up a little bit, and then I went to my stack for that because it's higher than these hats, and just trying to figure out the sticking of, okay, how can I get my right hand over there, and like when's the best time to do it with the sticking that I'm going to use.
Yeah. All right, so number 3, and it's, I don't know why, maybe because it's Jason Sudeikis, but whenever I'm saying this guy's name and like just hanging out with friends, I always say Jason Stanier. John Stanier from Battles, John. And so you didn't, I mean, you just kind of specified, or you didn't specify, you just said him in general. So I just chose a song that I thought was cool from one of my favorite records of theirs. The album's Mirrored, and I don't know how to pronounce this song name, but it's the word diamond with a capital D in the beginning and a lowercase d at the end. So D Diamond D. Yeah, whenever John rolls through town on like a fly date, I'm sure every SIR style snare is just like, please don't pick me, please don't pick me, please don't pick me.
But yeah, so it was definitely the first time, because I never really listened to like Helmet or Tomahawk, the other bands that he plays with.
Yeah.
But the first time I heard Battles, and I think it was one of their EPs, one of my buddies in college showed it to me, and it totally just freaked me out. Like, this is some really cool stuff. And they were still playing with Ty and Day Braxton at the time, which is huge. But yeah, I can't remember. It was like EPB or something. I can't remember which one it was. After that, and like listening to it over and over and over again. And then when Mirrored came out, immediately bought that and started learning like all of it, basically. Yeah. And then seeing like him play live, how just hard he smashes everything, and then his ride cymbal all the way up here, like I was immediately fell in love with it. But like just the playing style in general, because at the time I guess when like Gloss Drop came out, I was playing in Speths, and nice. we had like a sort of similar sound, and we were just always experimenting with different styles, because all of us came from like a totally different musical background, and it almost like it didn't really like make sense, all of us playing together. But when we would write songs, a little bit of everybody was like in that song every time, so it ended up being a little bit experimental, but like very much Battles, like Radiohead, Sigur Rós ish. It could be like very epic and open, or like super linear and fast like that. But his drumming style was like, okay, I'm this is kind of what I'm doing right now, so I'm just going to dive in. And at the time I was playing, my only drum kit instructor had just moved to London with his band, and he left his drum set with me to look after while he was living over there. It was like a Pearl Masters Studio. So I was using like the 22-inch kick, 10-inch rack tom, 16-inch floor tom. I just had a pair of hi-hats, my snare, and a ride cymbal. Like I was totally just like ripping him off as much as I possibly could.
Sure.
And like everything that I would be writing would be mainly linear stuff, like super heavy footwork all the time. And I think through trying to play like that and learning a lot of the Battles tunes, it like I felt like I started to get or develop like a sound that I really wanted to like chase after, or at least a style, maybe not a sound, but more of a style. And then later on, like listening to different electronic music, I was always so surprised like how well all those beats and rhythms transferred into that stuff. And especially something like footwork, the electronic style footwork. There was so much like going or so much related from the two styles. And I feel like listening to him, emulating him as much as I could, really like helped me transfer into playing purely electronic music like very easily.
I'm not familiar with footwork. That's a style of music. Mm-hmm. Can you describe it a little bit?
Well, a lot of like the machine drum stuff that would be like footwork. So like 140 BPM to like 160, and usually you have like there would be like one snare hit per measure, but then the kick drum is kind of like driving, or the bass sound, the kick, whatever, is driving the rhythm a little bit more than the snare is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to number 4. And I mean, you kind of started talking about this, but the perfection that is electronic music, in parentheses, how everything's on the grid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I
mean, that was playing, like starting out on the drum set and like jamming with my parents and my brother in the basement. Like that was it was all before I was anywhere close to being into electronic music. So, and even playing with like my friends in high school and like having jams or whatever, it was still very much like rock, blues based. And I wasn't really analyzing it back then, but all like feel based music. Nothing like none of us listening to a click or playing to a click or anything like that. But then when I got into electronic music and I started playing to electronic music, I just like became fascinated with being right on the beat with all of their notes, because I knew like, okay, this is programmed music. Like this is all exactly in time on the grid. And I just wanted to be able to lock in with that like as best as I could. Mm-hmm. So for a while, it was kind of just like my obsession of finding whether it's like some jungle tune or just Mr. Wazo. Wazo's a little bit different because he uses a lot of swing a lot of the time, but even that swing is calculated.
Sure.
So it's still technically, you can call it gridded.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely got obsessed with just trying to be like the drum machine and just doing my best at like imitating that, making it sound or making it hard to tell if the drums are real or if they're programmed. And then like the deeper I would get into some genres, and especially if it came to like jungle and drum and bass, like the more I learned about it, is like, wait a second, they're just sampling old records that weren't played to a click and then putting them together, like looping them, cutting them and everything. So it's not really as perfect as I thought it was to begin with. Now, when the song is like finished and they have everything lined up, to a degree, it's like there are loops happening, but even within those bars, there's a little bit of give, like back or forth on the beat. And like it kind of opened up my mind, like why, I mean, it wasn't, time wasted trying to be the drum machine, but it was more, it opened me up when I learned more about the genre and how human it really is, or how human electronic music like really is.
Sure.
Because they're taking all that old music and repurposing it, whether it's like faster, like drum and bass, or just using like one shot from a sample in a song or something like that. And it just like, it made me go a little bit deeper into like my relationship with time and like, especially just like with a click.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to get better at controlling my time against the click rather than the click controlling what I'm doing. Now that I'm like thinking about it with my old band, we had one computer running for just like we were using some sounds from it, but everybody in the band had their own looper, and most of them were just line 6 DL4s.
Okay.
So none of the clocks were connected whatsoever. Sure. And there are multiple times where everybody's hitting in loops at the same time. And luckily I didn't like break anyone mentally, because I was like trying to get everybody to be in this practice space like 4 or 5 times a week so we can actually nail all this stuff that we're trying to do without these loopers having connected clocks.
Yeah.
But as soon as we would like start a song, and if it was started like with a loop on a DL4, like that's not it's never a perfect loop, like you were just saying. So it's just imitating that space and time and then doing it again.
Yeah.
Rather than it knowing that it's correct the entire time, or correct.
Well, and yeah, exactly. And I'm a broken record, and I'm sorry, people that listen. I bring this up a lot, but you haven't heard me talk about this. But Brody Simpson talks about that kind of stuff. He's more talking about like Dilla kind of style beats, but it's the same with loops. Is just it's the repeatability of dynamics, and then that becomes, so even if there is this weird tension between loops, after you hear it consistently 3 times in your head, that tension becomes perfect for whatever you're listening to.
Well, it like the tension completely leaves once you have it like repeat it enough times. Then you like naturally will find a pulse in it.
Yeah, because there was when Madden Class was on the show, she was talking about Hiatus Coyote and Perrin Moss. I went down a little rabbit hole of him recording, and he would just play beats, and he's a great drummer, but he would purposely he'd have like his hand on like some mixer, and he was playing with like one hand, so it wasn't like his best performance, so it kind of sounded kind of weird. He would chop it and just like loop a section, and it sounded so magical. And you're like, oh, it really is that easy, just making something feel good and then repeat it. And who cares? So this is going to be number 5, and it's Scene Die Like a Dog Trio. And so I did, when I was looking up, there is the Die Like a Dog quartet, but you were very specific about it is, I'm just going to have you say their names because I'm probably going to butcher them.
So the drummer is Hamid Drake, the upright bass player is William Parker, and the sax player is Peter Brotzman.
Okay. So go ahead.
Peter Brotzman is pretty well known in that world, just with all his compositions, like pretty wild saxophone player or musician in general. But yeah, I can't remember how long ago this was. But a group of friends and I went up to Buffalo to watch them because one of my friends in town, he was like one of the first guys I met when I moved up here. And he had a few bands. He's an older guy. And he had a few projects that were kind of in the same, like cut from the same cloth, very like free avant-garde type stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I met him when I first moved up here, and he was still playing out, but he has vertigo. So he actually ended up like not being able to play for a really long time. And he didn't know if he was going to be able to really play at all anymore. And he had this beautiful 1979 Tama Superstar bop kit.
Ooh, nice.
It was like, it's absolutely gorgeous. So once he like didn't think he was going to be able to play anymore, he like gifted it to me to hold on to for him. Like it was kind of like a just in case, just keep an eye on this for me. And it was, I mean, I was totally shocked because I had played the kit before and I always talked to him about it, but he hand wrote letters to everyone in his immediate family, like asking that their permission for him to give the kit to me to like look after for him. Wow. After he told me all this stuff, I'm like, dude, this is fucking heavy, man. Like this is insane. So that's like that kit is like my baby. I don't play it too often. But there's always certain times that maybe if I think he'll come out to like a jazz gig I'll play in town, like I'll pull the kit out and I'll take it to one of those and play it for him.
Can you send me a picture of it so I can put it in the show notes? Yeah, that's sure. Awesome. Yeah, that's tricky because you obviously want your friend, and it sounds like he's an amazing dear friend. You want him to be able to play again, but you're also like, but I want the kit.
Well, I mean, even when he like told me that, and then he told me about the letters and everything, I was like, I'm honored that you went through all your family and to do this, but like, do you want to do this? Like, you can still have it at home. And he's like, well, it's just going to sit around in cases and you can actually get some use out of it. Like, fuck, man. So it's the 79 bop kit plus a full set of 60s A's.
Ugh. Can't get better than that.
Yeah. 15-inch hats, 22-inch ride, 18-inch crash, and a 20-inch flat ride.
My God. Well, to quick pivot kind of, but like, do you exclusively play Sugar at like in your studio?
Yeah. All the drums I have are from Jeff.
Oh, it's insane. So good. They're so good.
No, they're not, Jeff. I hate them. You're terrible at drum making.
Yeah, he paid me to bring this up, so I'm going to Venmo him right now if you want to give me a second. But yeah, so you said that you got to speak to Hamid after one of the shows.
Oh yeah. So sorry about that. We went up to Buffalo and to see them play. And we ended up sitting, it was a really, really small little theater. And we were first two rows because there was a group of like 8 of us that went. So we were in the first 2 rows and Hamid's kick drum was like 4 feet away from me. Mm-hmm. And he was playing all these cymbals, like definitely not his kit, not his cymbals, but they had been there since the night before. So he had duct tape on his ride cymbal, basically covering the entire bottom of the ride cymbal. And then on the other, like even on his hi-hats, he had like half of the top hat covered in duct tape. He had a like bunch of towels on everything, and he would like move all that stuff around. And he even took like duct tape off of the hat mid gig to get a different sound. And watching all of them play together and being totally like 3 completely separate parts all happening at the same time, but the connection between all three of them while they were playing, and then randomly, and maybe not even randomly, but like hitting these like hits together after playing like 64 bars of complete madness, and then like dropping down to like bare like pianissimo, and then like playing into another song, like building it back up. And the entire gig started with Brotzman like walking out. The green room was right next to the stage. It was supposed to start at like 8:00 or something. They finally came out of the green room at like 8:45.
Nice. Very Guns N' Roses. Yeah.
Yeah. So they walk out, and Brotzman goes up to the mic with his sax and just like screams this note for like a minute straight. And then they went right into the first tune. And it was like totally meant to, you know, bring you out of your comfort zone from the first note. And then like, they're in control of the audience now. Like, we're going to take you all over the place. You have no decision in this. Like, this is going to be a ride.
Yeah.
And it totally was. It like was blowing my mind listening to like the relationship Hamid had with Parker, and then what Brotzman was doing over top. And like, you really let yourself go and get immersed in it. And then your brain starts making all these different like rhythmic connections and melodic connections between the bass and the saxophone. And it was almost like you could hear multiple songs playing at the same time. It was just such a wild experience being that close to it and watching them all work together, but like separately at the same time. So after the gig, and like after I switched my underwear out,
yeah,
I was having a cigarette, and Hamid Drake walked out, and he just lights up a cigarette. So I like awkwardly like, "Oh, great job, man." And we started talking. And I just told him like, yeah, I also play drums, blah, blah, blah. And I just told him like, man, I know it's late now, but I really can't wait to get back to Erie and go immediately to my studio and practice. And he like stopped me dead. He took the cigarette out of his mouth. He's like, don't go in practice. You go back to your studio and you play. Go and play. And like, it was, I mean, it was almost like my dad yelling at me, like type of vibe. It was like, no, you don't go, and you go and play. And then like the entire two-hour ride back to Erie is just like play, go and play. It was just like bouncing around in my head. And just the idea of it, like, yeah, you can go to your studio, you can practice, you know, rudiments or whatever the hell you want to practice, but you're not practicing performing. You're not practicing being in the moment. You can observe yourself practicing and say like, hey, I think I'm getting better at this because I'm putting the time in and I'm practicing. But if it's not showing up on the gig or showing up when you need it to, or it's still like an awkward moment of like making a decision in real time to do something, like you're not playing, that you're removing yourself from like what's actually happening in that moment to think back to something that you did. And then you have to think forward to be able to like use it in real time. And then you're completely removing yourself from the experience when you start doing that. So like playing, like in his words, he didn't tell me not to fucking practice, but he said to go play. And that just like really changed how I was thinking about music and how I thought about like how I spent my time in the studio. And I would start like dedicating either like a couple hours or even like a full day of playing and trying to reach for things and trying to make these sounds or like rhythms, different rhythms and compound rhythms, but the entire time just be as present as I possibly could while doing it. And I feel like doing that, like practicing performing more than just practicing, helped me so much, and like definitely just like boosted my confidence when I was on a gig. Or like just if I'm recording something, like, okay, it's performance time. It's not practice time. It's time to go.
Yeah, I think, and I'm going to butcher what I'm trying to say, but thinking back to when I was a kid, I'm 33. So when I was growing up, there wasn't YouTube, there wasn't all this stuff. And like so much more of the progress that became who I am as a player was in those times when the YouTube online videos on what you should practice, do this for the, do your left hand with this, or learn this, not so much licks, but just like work on this specific technique stuff. That's almost like, it's obviously I've still improved as a drummer, but I've kind of hit a plateau of my personality behind the kit, because I don't necessarily play enough,
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And honestly, if anybody's not familiar with Hamid Drake, just look up some clips of him playing, because I mean, it's just like raw emotion every time he's behind the kit.
I do want to play, by the way, to go back to battles real quick, the EP was called EPC/BEP. It's just so you know, if that was bothering you. You were right, technically. I do have a clip I wanted to play where it's under, on Spotify, it's under Hamid's name, but it's Irene Schweitzer. But I'm just going to play, it's called A Former Dialogue. And but this album came out this year, so it's one of the most awesome. It's the first track off the album Celebration, which is Irene Schweizer and Hamid Drake. When you do sit down to practice, because I'm sure maybe I'm not sure, but I assume you do still have times and you're like, okay, I want to work on this. How do you decide what to work on?
I think lately, or I guess more recently, it's if I'm listening to something and there's some sort of disconnect I'm having with like whatever the drum part is on a tune, I usually that's how I'll start. I'll just pick a song, either that I don't know how to play, or it's just something that I've really admired for a while and I've never sat down to do it yet. Cause that's a lot of time practice is weird with me, especially with drums, because after 20 minutes of hearing drum sounds, I don't want to fucking hear drum sounds anymore. It's the last thing that I want, is to just keep hearing the sound of a snare drum or a ride cymbal nonstop. So if I'm just sitting there and trying to play or do syncopation or coordination stuff, I get really sick of that very quickly. Mm-hmm. So if I have an actual musical element to either be, try to learn or at least guide me in some stylistic way, then I'm going to immediately be so much more invested into doing what I'm doing, rather than forcing myself to sit down and just play drums with nothing else going on. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to drum sounds and everything, I never did the drum shed thing. Never understood it. If I'm in a room and 6 people are playing drums at the same time, get me out of that room.
I'm with you. Well, that's kind of why I was talking earlier when we were DMing, is I don't want this to be a drummy podcast, because I think I actually want to get more singer-songwriters, not singer-songwriters, just songwriters in general, producers that do not play drums, because a lot of times their perspective on what they look for in what drums should be doing are what drummers should hear more than just what some gearhead would want to talk about,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's it. Even the maybe 2 times I've been in the experience of oh man, we should shed, or have a buddy over and we both play drums or something. It's I get so sick of it so quickly, and I'm just not invested in it whatsoever. Dude, I will play a backbeat for you to freak out over for an hour, but trading 4s with each other, doing that, I don't want to do that.
Dude, you couldn't be preaching to a more parallel choir here. So
when it comes to drummers or favorite drummers, all of the ones that I would consider one of my favorite drummers, it's not it's none of the music that I play. One of my all-time favorite drummers, I don't know if you've had him on here or not, is Eric Slick. He plays with Dr. Dog.
Yes.
And like he does his own solo stuff. Everything he does on the drum set is like in that band. And I mean, he's played with some pretty ridiculous people.
Yeah.
It has like crazy chops, but when he plays with that band, it's just perfect. Yeah. Like the sounds that he gets and the decisions that he makes. And my wife and I have seen them live a couple of times, and it's always my favorite show.
Yeah, he's very humble too. You wouldn't think of how much of a monster with the dude. Yeah, his mind is in the best possible way ridiculous. He's so funny. All right, Ian. Well, I'll let you go, man. But hopefully I'll talk to you soon, and have a good rest of the day, man.
Yeah, you too.
And that's the show. Be sure to subscribe, and if you're listening on a platform that allows for ratings or reviews, do that. It helps more people find the show, which means the show will get better and bigger, and hopefully I'll have a chance to sell out one day. But you'd be an OG listener that could brag to all your friends. Anyways, also, why don't you go ahead and check out bigfatsnaredrum.com and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and all the socials. Just search for @BigFatSnareDrum and you will find it. This show is edited in part using iZotope RX8 audio editor. It's amazing, so go check that out at iZotope.com. Bye.